This is Sally Clarkson, and this is one more Sunday night where I'm preparing a Mentoring Monday for tomorrow. This is Mentoring Monday number 3, and I'm going to be speaking tonight a little bit about training. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old. That means when he is mature, when he grows a beard. So training a child is so important. I always am asked the question, what do I think about discipline? How much, how long, when to be gracious, when to get upset? And I think a lot of moms don't understand the overarching importance of training. Training, if you even look at it from a physiological point of view, they're finding that little babies, even from the time they're born, they are beginning to develop these roadways in their brain. And the way that you treat a child, the way that you talk to a child, the way you love a child is already imprinting training pathways in their brain to expect what life is going to be like. Now let's suppose that you want your child to perceive that God is a God who answers prayers, a God who is loving, a God who is responsive, a God who cares about his children. Then logically, how would you start training a baby? You would take the baby in your arms and you would kiss it and you would hug it, you would keep it close to you, you would respond to its cries, you would comfort it, you would rock to this baby and sing to it. There's so many ways that even little bitty ways we are training into our children expectations of what God is like, because in our training we're supposed to incarnate God, to take God into the meat of our body and be like him. But another thing I want to say is this is the 24 Family Ways. I think that it's something that Clay wrote when our children were little, because we knew that before we could correct them or discipline them for having a bad attitude, they would need to know first what we expected of them. So we came up with 24 values that we have Bible verses connected to it, and we taught it to our older kids, and the younger kids got it when they were very young, and we did it 3 times in their lifetime. And that way, before we would go into a grocery store, we would train them. We would say, now, Mommy has given you a little bowl of Cheerios, a little thing with Cheerios in it or grapes or whatever, and Mommy wants you to quietly sit in your basket, and we're going to be here about 15 minutes. Or you say, I don't want anyone to ask me for anything extra today. And at the end of the time, if we can make it through without any fussing, then we will plan on going to the park. But you have a choice to make. Mommy wants you to choose to be disciplined and responsive, and I'm just so excited to have you with me because I'm so proud of you children. You're training in expectations before you go somewhere. Instead of taking a child into the grocery store because you're in a hurry, they are overstimulated, you're on your way to an appointment or something, and then when they're in the store, you're saying, stop it! Haven't you been in stores before where women are yelling at their babies, I don't want you to do that anymore! Because they never trained them to begin with before they went into a situation. We would train our children to manners. I want you, when the people come to our house tonight, Mommy wants you to be grateful. I want you to smile at them, and I want each of you to have a question to ask them, because when we talk to people and show interest, it changes their lives. It makes them happy. What interesting question can you ask them? When our babies are little, we spend all of our time with them so that we can hold them in our arms and say, no, you may not use that voice. Mommy wants you to speak with a soft voice. We grab their hands. You may not use your hands for hitting. You must always take their hand. You must always use your hand for softness. Another part of training that is so important is what Clay and I called will training. It talks in Deuteronomy, at the end of Deuteronomy, where God is talking to the Israelites, and he says that to them, see that I have set before you today life and prosperity. If you obey me, I will bless you. I will give you honor. I will multiply your children. Or you are choosing cursing. If you choose to disobey me, if you choose to go away from my laws and my principles, then you are choosing to have judgment, because you are choosing to go away from what I have created to be good for you. And so we taught our children from the time they were 0 almost that they had a will. We would say, Mommy can't make you be good, but I'm praying that you'll choose to be good so that I can honor you. And so when our children, for instance, were little babies and they would scream and cry, I'm not talking about an infant. An infant needs to be attended to and touched and loved and cared for. But when one of our children would just start uncontrollably crying because they were mad or angry about something, I would say, oh my goodness, Mommy is allergic to crying and whining. But when you can choose to have a quiet voice, then I will listen to you. And it's amazing because my children wouldn't go, wah, wah, Mommy can't hear you. I won't listen until you can have a quiet voice. My children learned to control their voices. Training was a constant part. I kept my children in these little baggies on my chest. I held them. I talked to them all the time, and I told them where we were going, what we were doing. I rocked them. I would correct every situation. In our 24 Family Ways, it says we choose to be respectful. It says we choose to love. We choose to honor. And it tells the verses that they memorize. Even my little babies were listening when my older children were trained. Training is that aspect that helps us to understand that our children will not be peacemakers if we're not peacemakers. If we're training them to a truth, we need to be living that truth. If we want them to be forgiving, we need to ask them for forgiveness when we offend them. If we want them to be self-controlled, we need to be self-controlled. But training also is that aspect that has to take place all the time. If your child is neglected, overstimulated, exhausted, hasn't eaten, blood sugar is low, you haven't given them a regular routine, then you're the one that needs to be trained, because your children are pre-wired by God to cry and to whine and to show their displeasure when something is going wrong in their body. So children need to be trained morning, noon, and night. That's what it talks about in Deuteronomy. And so training is such an important aspect, probably the most important. Training to manners, training to honor. You honor them. Training to be considerate. You serve them while you're teaching them to serve others. I hope you enjoyed this particular time. I don't want to make my times too long for you, but training is so important. It's something that God does in our lives. We need to do with our children. When you train consistently, when you know what it is you're trying to train, your children will be much more responsive and easier to discipline because they know what to expect. But training can only take place when a foundation of love, affirmation, encouragement is given. Because even as the new article in Christianity Today talked about, that important first role of a mom is to love, affirm, help children to know they're cherished, that you're listening for them, that you will comfort them, so that someday when they're older, their brain patterns are already set to saying, my mom and dad met my needs. They taught me, they loved me, they provided for me. I believe I can trust God to do the same thing. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.